I'm Rebecca. I was on the family panel earlier today, if you were there for that. And I'm a mental health clinician in Portland, Maine. And I've been working with this program since 2012. Saras?
I'm Saras Yerlig, and I'm the peer support specialist on the team. I have lived experience over the past about 7 years with some major mood changes, and more recently, well, not quite recently, but in the more recent future, past, I've had experience with big mood changes as well as like losing touch with reality in some ways, and having beliefs that didn't make sense to other people, thoughts that didn't make sense to other people, some perceptual changes. And so I bring that to my work with all the folks that are part of our program that are going through similar types of experiences. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I got trained in intentional peer support, which is a model that's, I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so I think you're familiar with this, but it's the model that the state of Maine has chosen to use in our peer services. So everybody that does peer work in Maine is trained through an intentional peer support model. That's what, at least that's what the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services has like claimed as the sort of best practice. So that's what I got trained in, and I have been working at this program, which is my first peer position, since January. So that's a little background on me.
And since we have a small group, I think you astutely noted some nods about IPS.
It's good to get a sense of what people might be familiar with as we're presenting. So now we'll just go ahead, and these are the learning objectives you will find in the packet. We're just going to sort of throw those up there, but we're going to actually maybe give you a little bit more of a detailed sense of what we're going to talk about, a little bit more of a relevant outline. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with setting the stage. So this is what was already in place before I joined the clinical team, as far as like how everybody was ready to include peer support, what our funding was like, that sort of stuff. And then getting started is the first sort of stages of integration. So what the first few months looked like, what were the things that we had to figure out as a team, what were some of the challenges we had to overcome. And then we'll spend most of the talk talking about like how are things going now, what's working, what are the challenges, how are we dealing with those challenges in the present day. And then we'll conclude with looking forward, what are we hoping for the future of our program, of programs in Maine, where we see ourselves headed.
And we wouldn't be doing our right job if we weren't leading with stories of people who, it's okay, you got it, who are actually informing us and what we're doing and how we're doing. So this is a video we just created over the last couple of months. It's a lot of fun. We did some interviews with our team, some interviews with young people, and it's about 6 minutes.
I'm going to try not to cringe too much watching myself.
It's about 6 minutes long. And as with anything, we're going to be welcoming questions throughout this. So let's make it a conversation. Go ahead.
I pressed it. It just takes a second, I think. Yeah.
But let's take a deep breath collectively together and just be present in the room. If breathing isn't do it for you, then just wiggling your toes, doing something different in your body, changing your position. But you are here. You aim to come here for a purpose, and we're glad you're here. So thank you.
I really like my job because I get to be in the office and outside, and I have a huge love of the outdoors. So it's always been something that I've wanted to have as a component of my work. I've always liked working with people and connecting and being real and honest. And that's a really big part of this job, is being able to form meaningful connections. It's also really interesting and therapeutic to be able to talk about my own experiences with lots of different people.
Peer support was helpful in understanding my mental health issues because when I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, my peer support person would talk about a time like when they were dealing with stuff like that, and kind of said like that it was just kind of nice, like they got out of that. And she's just someone that's easy to talk to, and I feel like she listens to me, and it's a different experience than talking to a therapist, because it's like you're not just sitting in an office across from each other, it's like just hanging out with someone.
When we first integrated peer support into the peer program, it was with another agency, and it made it really hard to have it fully integrated into our service, because it was almost like it was an afterthought, and we had a really hard time making the connections that were really critical to bringing people into the program.
Especially when I first started the program, when I didn't know anyone in the program, I didn't really know anyone that had gone through anything that I was dealing with at the time. And Saras kind of like was able to understand things that my friends didn't really understand or want to hear about.
But even before somebody comes in for an intake of the program, they could meet a peer support specialist and see them as a critical member of our team. And I think it's really changed how we work with our young people and families, because we utilize the peer support specialist as a real connector to other aspects of the program.
Even when I wasn't in a very good place and I actually ended up in the hospital, my peer support person came and she would visit me like every few days, and that just meant like a lot to me. In each of those days, those were like my favorite parts of the day, even though we weren't really able to do much, and we would just kind of sit like on my bed, play cards. It just helped to know that other people were thinking about me who weren't just in my family. Like there were people who, like, there were other people in the world that were thinking about me, and it kind of made me feel more like people were trying to get me out of the hospital, because if she knew I was in there, other people knew I was in there, and maybe I wouldn't have to be in there anymore.
I think that what I just appreciate is that I think that a lot of our young people really recognize that our peer support person is able to disclose details of their own history, and then that creates a much lower barrier to engagement and reduces stigma, and also suggests that there is a way to engage with a team like peer that could actually be to their benefit. Whereas I think a lot of other folks, if their first point of engagement, or if they were really stuck only with docs and clinicians, that they would find it a bit overwhelming. But I think that our peer support person really makes it, sort of warms it up.
One of the most helpful things about peer support was the peer support group that we had, and we would just do like all sorts of different activities, and it would be different people from the program all getting together and doing stuff, and I got to meet a lot of different people. And so now I still have peer support, but I also have a whole group of other people that have also had similar experiences.
In these last few years of really just putting ourselves out there to try to be our best service by having people's stories and peer support lead the way, and developing these speaker bureaus of young people who found strength in their adversity and have redefined themselves based on their experiences in ways that they hadn't ever expected. That's the peer experience, and it's been the most exciting part of early psychosis work in years. And frankly, I'm just excited about where as a field and us in particular as a program, and me as a clinician, where we're all headed as a result of this. It's exciting times.
So thank you for fiddling with the audio to get our video done. We're proud of it. Thank you. Thank you, Saras and Katie, who really did bravely share her experiences simply from that perspective of wanting to give back. And I think somebody mentioned that at some point today. I start to get things mixed up, but the act of giving back is a major component of wellness and getting better. So that was part of Katie's journey as well in doing this. So a little bit about our program. First of all, as I said, this is a conversation and a dialogue, so don't be bashful. Is there anything anyone wanted to share from the video? Thoughts, reflections, questions, concerns? And you guys can hear me okay, right? Next to the buzz next door? Okay. All right. So keep us posted. So yes, coordinated specialty care, first episode program. Who's familiar with this terminology and what this represents? Who would like to learn more? Yes. Okay. So just real quick, based on funding grants that are out there more widely, we are specialty program specifically directed for first and early episode psychosis. So even prior to first episode, that's where a peer program has its roots, is in earliest experiences of changes in thought perception, typically under stress. So really we've kind of grown from the adolescent world and into the adult world, which is why our priority to have families lead the way and now have peers lead the way is really part and parcel of who we are. But we are a multidisciplinary team. Our age is 14 to 26. We worked hard to get that range as wide as possible. It wasn't originally 26. We will keep pressing, and as I mentioned earlier, we have another sister program that's for 26 up to 35, which we're so proud of. We take no credit for. It was really the persistence of someone else nearby. We work with people within approximately a first episode of psychosis, and there's reason for that given the niche that we're working with together with the groups that we create in terms of the dialogue that comes up for the young people in care. So that said, many people do have first episodes of psychosis after the age of 26, and many people take more than 1 year to acknowledge their symptoms of psychosis and to name them as such. And we do our best to work with as many people as we can while choosing this niche that we've carved out mostly for quality of care for the people we're working with. And this is what it looks like in another form. We have the person at the center, the person and their family, or support people at the center, and we wrap around them with peer support integrated fully on the team. Multifamily group is a main component of our treatment, so as I said, that's the building blocks for social change. In those groups, they're problem-solving groups where we break down a current problem for somebody that they self-identify with, whether it's a parent, a sibling, or a young person with psychosis, and we problem-solve, brainstorm essentially together. So we could be brainstorming a lost history book for a sibling, we could be brainstorming, how do I know when to push my child and when to hold back and trust for a parent, or we could be brainstorming, how do I manage voices in the middle of the night? So that's the multifamily groups, and then we have individual counseling. I have a personal love for CBT for psychosis, and I train and teach and practice that because of its openness and inclusiveness in treatment directions. We have a care coordinator, case manager type person who is fantastic at basically bridging to resources or bridging connections within the program. So if my connection with someone starts to falter, our case manager really sort of swoops in and helps to build bridges. That's what she's about. I'd like to call her a bridge of some sort. Psychiatric consultation and medication. So you see also transdisciplinary, all on the same level within the team, no hierarchy within that. And a supported education and employment specialist who helps us with the things that make us feel best. All in the midst of that, it's rooted in a heavy community education model So I heard the concern last night from someone who said, well, this is all well and good, but what if that person doesn't self-report or understand that they have psychosis until it's too late? That's where community education comes in. We're in schools, we're in communities, we're in mental health clinics, we're in primary care practices, anywhere that have a first-hand experience with young adults. So setting the stage, one of the things that was very important to us from my perspective as a clinician on the team, both before and during the integration of Saras's role as peer support specialist, is we had certain things that helped it to be successful. So one is, I've mentioned the mental health block grant that funds early psychosis programs. And just to give you a sense, this is a 10% set-aside grant. Most states have it. Actually, long story, not a pretty one. Maine gave away its money because it's an unpleasant story with our past governor, which I won't get into. But the 10% set-aside is a pocket of money that's specifically for prevention, so it allows these early psychosis programs to proliferate. And what we mean by that, last year in 2018, there was about 265 programs in 49 states, and no, I don't know who the outlier is, but 49 states have upwards on 300 programs. Just 10 years ago, there were 20 programs in only 2 states. So just to give you a sense, in 10 years is how much this has grown, and that's primarily because of the block grant. 75% of these programs include peer support. That doesn't mean they include it in the way that we do. We have chosen and made it a priority to integrate our peer support. That's come out of past experience, trials, and tribulations, and we're really happy with how it's going now so far. Similarly, it's not all CSE programs do family-oriented work. They might do family-involved and family-informed. There's Navigate as a model. There's other, On Track New York uses that model. And there's different applications of what it means to include a family, because this is complicated business. So what I talk about is my method, our method in the peer program of including families.
So one of the reasons why this integration has been so successful, and we do feel like it's been successful, is because there is already a growing and established network of peer support specialists in Maine, and that's growing. And Maine Behavioral Healthcare is one of the sort of larger organizations that has their own Department of Peer Services, and we have a director who has lived experience himself, and so he oversees many different peer support specialists, all that have received the same training that I have in various different programs throughout the state. And then there's other organizations that also employ peer support specialists. So there's a pretty big network. So I came into this supported and sort of buoyed by a lot of other people already doing this work. And I came into a team that was really ready to have somebody integrated, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. I felt appreciated. They clearly wanted somebody there and were really passionate about making it work. And I think there are a number of people with my position that are trying to start in various other clinical programs that haven't come to that place yet, and there's just struggle to make it work because people are just not ready yet to really have somebody that, sort of centrally involved, or they just don't know enough about peer support yet. And so there's been a lot of struggles in other programs, but because the staff, the clinical staff at the peer program were so ready and well informed already, it made me sort of joining the team and becoming as integrated as we have pretty easy to some extent. Yeah.
And as I described, we've had past trials and tribulations where it wasn't so easy, and part of that was it was often like it felt like models bumping against models, and I think Sarah Lynch mentioned it well when she said it felt sort of like an afterthought, the inclusion of peer support. Did she say that? Or am I making that up? Mm-hmm. And so not an afterthought in the sense like it wasn't as important, although there may well have been layers unknown, sort of unintentionally by us, that it may have been. But it was also meet the whole clinical team, and we also have a great peer support. You'll meet them as soon as you meet them, okay? Great, so 2 weeks later, they've met with the whole team, and then we connect them with this person off-site. Do you see how that it was built in as an afterthought, and that was not at all our intention. It was just sort of how pragmatically it came about. So it was a priority for us to integrate.
So now we're going to talk about just the first stage, so the first couple months of me joining the team, which was the beginning of January. What were some of the things we had to figure out initially to be able to make things work well? So communication is going to be a big theme. You're going to hear us probably say that word a lot in this presentation because it's so important. I think we probably all recognize that in various parts of our lives. So one of the first things we needed to figure out is how were we communicating among ourselves? Like how did were we all using the same language? Did the clinicians and the psychiatrists have the same understanding of peer support that I did? And was I able to articulate what it was for me and my background and my training? Could I articulate that well to clinical staff? I remember making notes, like, how do I explain this? Like, what is my role? And having to do a little research to figure out how to articulate it as well as I could. We also needed to figure out how to structure our team meetings. So a lot of you said you're familiar with the intentional peer support model, but one of the sort of focal pieces is that it's sort of like the slogan, nothing about us without us. So in the intentional peer support model practice, you don't talk about people if they're not there. You don't talk about clinical information without the person present. And so the team meetings, there's a lot of sharing, coordinating of clinical information and making sure everybody's on the same page. And that's something that is not within my practice to be part of, but we also wanted to be able to be working as closely together as we could. So we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the like nitty-gritty details of that, but we kind of had to figure out like, when do I leave? When do I come? For what information? How do we make this flow? So that was one of the first pieces I think that we had to figure out. And then along with that is just how much can we share? You know, what information is it okay to share with each other and still respect that sort of nothing about us without us. And then we also had to figure out how would we communicate about peer support with participants and families. So when I joined, there was already a robust number of participants. The program was up and running, and so I had to figure out how do I tell these people that maybe had never heard of this before, like what I was doing, and they were already part of the program. So, and also when do I do that, and how do we connect? Like how do the clinical staff connect me with the people that are already part of the program? So figuring out that sort of process of how do we make those introductions. So those were sort of the first things we needed to figure out.
And I just wonder, before we move on to what things are looking like now, just in terms of integration and in those first stages, that's often where a lot of where there's a lot of struggle. So are there any questions or thoughts or comments from anyone's experience? So thank you for your question. So the question is coming from a person, so we need to repeat the questions only because of the video recording. But the question is in the midst of what you've experienced as disintegration on a lot of teams, how do you convey all this information to so many people and make sure no one misses anything, and sort of difficulty in communicating for such a large team, right? Saras, do you want to speak to that, or shall I?
Go ahead.
One of the things is it's a culture built in. To be present at all the team meetings. We have scheduled team meetings twice a week where we review the clinical information that all of the clinical team members need to know. And then from the perspective of the peer perspective, say it again? Not without us.
Nothing about us without us.
We'll
talk a little bit more about what team meetings look like in a couple slides.
Yep.
But you also take notes at the meeting, right? So if if a team member is sick and can't be there, then you pass along the information.
We have one shared note taker.
Right. Is that what you were sort of asking?
So the observation is we probably have a very good base of working together. We've just made a lot of mistakes, and that is for the record. So we're working on it.
But there is a big priority to collaborate. Like that is sort of fundamental part of the program, is that it is coordinated care, right? It's collaborative. So that's sort of expected and sort of necessary. So I think that probably helps for the cohesiveness of information relaying. And
it's a good point.
Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of what's going well with integration and how things are going at this stage, a huge piece is trust. And I think, as Saras has described, that this is often, trust and communication go hand in hand. This is often a piece that's just must be built in and must be built in with intention. So it's creating and cultivating a culture where difficult conversations are welcomed. Mm-hmm. And that, like, as simple as, wow, this is really tough. Can we try to talk this through before we respond? Something like that. But creating a culture for difficult conversations.
So, as I mentioned before, there's a director of peer services at Maine Behavioral Health Care that supervises peer support specialists in various different programs. So this person's my supervisor, and so I have support from the clinical team that's part of the PIER program, and there's a program director that supervises me there. I also have this outside supervisor that's solely focused on peer services and the intentional peer support work. So having support in multiple directions really helps me to feel like I have people I can go to, especially if I need to talk about a specific situation with one of the people I'm working with and don't want to bring up names to somebody on the team or like specific situation to somebody on the team, because that would kind of go against the communicating about people when they're not there. I could bring it to my peer supervisor, and that would be totally confidential because he's not going to work with any of the other people that I'm working with. So I have that sort of outside supervision, which I think is really helpful for me to feel fully supported, and I think it's also helpful for the staff to know that they can trust that, like, I have people that I can look to if I'm in hard situations, and that I'm not just like flying by the seat of my pants, that I have people that I can talk to if I need support. So I think that's important.
I think it is too. And my experience of you with that, and which I really appreciate, is I see you sorting out, like, well, this feels like something I can talk about with my supervisor. I'm having a really difficult time with this person, or I'm challenged in this way. But what I want to share with you is this, and then we talk about a more generalized or different aspect of it. So it's a very clear intention to really keep that separate. And similarly, we do not give Saras information about any of the participants before she meets them at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless there's a very explicit safety concern, and we keep the bar pretty high of what we call an explicit safety concern. It's just name, age, and
maybe what town they live in.
What town they live in, how to connect, or they connect at the office. So that's the intentional separation, but together. Mm-hmm. So we also set up expectations around giving feedback. And this goes both directions. If I ever say too much, just let me know, but can I offer you some feedback? So it's this built-in culture. And I think those are language, and these are questions that I've found develop more as the peer support specialist has been integrated in our team. We're more careful, almost more considerate of each other's experiences and feelings and private personal reactions, sort of, and in our interactions and our collegial relationships. If I ever say too much, just let me know, but can I offer some feedback?
Mm-hmm. And also being like, I found it's not always just on me to hold the boundary of like, nope, that's too much, I don't want that information about this person. That's not appropriate for my role to know that this person has this diagnosis, for example. It's not always me having to hold that boundary. I've found that the other members of the team are really great about checking in, is it okay for me to share this? Was that too much? And that's really helpful because it doesn't put all the sort of weight on me sort of maintaining that. Mm-hmm.
So we've mentioned a few times that we've made some mistakes. Yes? So
yes, I think you mentioned that, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that situation where we had the feeling of wanting to warn you? Or
Yeah, there was, this was sort of early on when I started working at the program. There was a clinician that came up to me and was like, just want to let you know that this person that you're going to be meeting doesn't make a lot of eye contact, and they might not talk a lot, and like, just don't take it personally, like it's not about you. And they were coming from this place of like wanting to make sure that like I wasn't going to take things badly or feel badly, or just to make sure that I wasn't going to misinterpret this other person. But what we realized is like I didn't need to hear that. Like I was perfectly capable of like making my own assessment of this person, and that didn't really lend itself to like bettering my relationship with them. And so we kind of had a conversation about how that wasn't necessary to share that.
Does that make sense, that scenario? Because I could find myself, I think in that particular one that you're thinking of, it wasn't me, but what but I can find myself easily making the same determination. So I kind of want to look out for, I also want to look out for this person I've gotten to know, the participant I've gotten to know. I don't want that person to be judged appropriately or assumptions to be made based on his silence or his presentation. And there's a wide variety of presentations that could be sort of off-putting. Or assumptions could be made. So I find myself wanting to be protective. And do I need to be someone else's protector? No. But thank you. That stigma that comes in, that's built into my profession. I'm your paternalistic protector. No, I'm not. I'm here alongside you as we figure this out together.
No, I'm just trying to understand.
So the question was there some sort of microaggression, or there's some sort of mistaken belief that a peer support specialist wouldn't be able to handle somebody in the same way? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think there may have been a little bit of that. I mean, I highly respect this clinician. We have a great working relationship. But I think there probably was a little bit of that. This is somebody new. You don't have the degree that I do. Are you capable? And so as we've gotten to know each other, the trust has been built, and we know that we are totally able to handle these kind of things. And so I think it just takes time as well, and conversations. But yeah, I think there was probably a little bit of that.
From the perspective of who might make that blunder and has in other ways, I would say yes, that probably was an unintended microaggression that's awesome for us to keep check on and remember that it happens even with best intentions.
And
We are
lastly,
human.
I, as somebody who's obviously been part of the mental health system and has had both positive experiences and some experiences that I wish had gone differently, I really appreciate that the staff at the peer program are really welcome sort of those conversations about what was that like for you? What was it like being in the hospital? What do you think about this? This was how I felt when I was working at the hospital as a therapist, and these are the things that I noticed, and what do you think about that? So there's been a lot of conversations around just from both perspectives. What is it like to work in a kind of broken system, and how that's hard on both ends, and how can we just continue the dialogue around that? So I've really appreciated that my colleagues have been so open to having those conversations.
And imagine, and then again, not making an assumption, but raising the question, are there people in this room who share frustrations with the mental health system that their participants or their colleagues or their peers are experiencing as well? Yes. This is a point of shared connection from different perspectives.
So we've already touched on the team meeting a couple times, so we'll just break it down a little bit more for you.
Yeah. So as I said, we meet twice a week. We've cultivated a culture that you need to be present, and 30 minutes with peer support, and 60 minutes with just the clinical team only, where we share information about people's experiences in interfacing with our treatment team and with their goals and et cetera, in terms of wellness and functioning and recovery. A huge aspect of this that has been built in with the peer support integration is the all-staff weekly check-in, which happens in that first 30 minutes. And Saras introduced this to our team, and tell us more.
Yeah, so this was a suggestion from my peer supervisor when I was raising the concern of how hard it is to really have great working relationships for my colleagues and enjoy spending time with them and want to be connected, but also not be able to be part of this sort of intense time where they're really collaborating. And so we came up with the idea of having a check-in that we do once a week that everybody's present for, where we can check in about a highlight from our week, something that's been challenging either in our personal life or at work. Just like a minute per person. We just kind of go around the circle. And we kind of took the multifamily group model where we have a check-in for each problem-solving group, where you're asked what's something that's going well in the last couple weeks and what's something that could be better. And so we kind of have adopted that loosely as a way to just sort of focus our check-ins. And this also is a time when you can talk more generally about maybe something that's going on at work that's challenging. So while it wouldn't be appropriate for us to use a name and a specific situation, because that doesn't align with the peer support model, we could talk generally about. There's somebody I'm working with, and they've been talking a lot about suicide, and it's really hard for me. And like, I just wanted you guys to know that that's, you know, been a struggle this week, right? A chance to just kind of get some support, share something, and not disclose like who it is, and not necessarily be asking for advice, but just a chance to be, you know, heard and understood. And we found that, I think it's helped, definitely I found it really helpful, but I think clinicians have also found it to be, and other team members to be a useful sort of addition to our team meetings.
Part of what gets us to team meeting, back to your question, is I don't want to miss the check-in, because I get to hear where people are really at. Do you guys get a sense of what we've described of what that check-in looks like? Because that's actually one of the nuts and bolts that I think makes this very successful. Do you want to illustrate it really quickly or no? Do you guys want a quick illustration, like 30 seconds or less, or are we good? We good?
Yes, I'll take it.
Illustration?
Okay.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Rebecca, how are you doing this week? What's going well and what could be better?
Well, I didn't get my minute of mindfulness before having this conversation, but I'll try to check in. So I've been really excited about the presentation coming up and being at the conference, because that inspires me, and that's fueled my energy for my work, so that feels great. And as part of that, I feel like I've really showed up this week for my clients and just been engaged and in tune and alive, and that feels great. And what's been challenging for me is I feel really like I can't keep at this breakneck pace, and I'm worried that I'm going to crash probably after the conference, and I'm concerned about my self-care. So that's what's been on my mind.
Thanks. What's going well? It's really exciting to be here. This is the first time I've ever been to a conference like this, and this conference in particular is really cool. My previous conference experiences were not the best, and I think it's because I really hadn't quite found my place, or like what my passion was, and where I really wanted to further my learning. And so getting to be here is awesome. What could be better? I didn't sleep very well last night, and so I'm feeling like this sort of like nervous, like jittery, like kind of, and I'm totally gonna crash because there's not the like normal energy that should be underneath that because of the lack of sleep. So yeah. So that would be an example
Similar.
of check-in, right? Could be heavier, could be lighter, could be personal, could be work.
Doesn't matter if you have MD after your name or IPS. I
And you
actually don't know
can-
what comes after. I'm sorry.
There
Is
isn't
it
really.
IPS? No. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you can also pass, of course.
But we don't. I don't think anyone. I mean, have we had a? Yes, we've had a pass once
We've
or
had a
twice.
pass.
Sometimes when intentions are just too powerful, but we really care
Mm-hmm.
for each other. And gosh, like, I don't think I could be in this long if I didn't have my humanity-based team appreciating me as a person.
How are we doing on time?
It is 3:15,
We have 15 minutes?
which means we haven't appropriately left plenty of room for conversation and questions.
Perfect.
So
You want me to talk about this?
we can. Yep.
So part of what has made this work, I think, is that we've both invested in learning about each other's models. So I attended like a CBTP training just to kind of get a sense of like what was cognitive behavioral therapy like. Just have a little more understanding of that, and sort of in the process of getting a multifamily group facilitating training experience. That's a clinical model, but also has a lot of just very sort of person-based, like human kind of based stuff. And likewise, the rest of the staff at one point took a short training in intentional peer support and sort of got some more background on that. I think they were saying they needed to do an upgrade because it's been a little bit of time. We also facilitate the multifamily group together. And that's just a chance for collaboration that we might really not see anywhere else in the program. That's really where I think we overlap the most. We also offer a community workshop, as Rebecca mentioned, that community education and outreach is like a big part of the work that we do. And there's a monthly workshop. It's an hour and a half long, and it talks about psychosis. Let's demystify that word. Let's give it some sort of real understanding, like real feeling, and let's talk about what that can look like, and how families can be supportive, what's going on in the brain. There's some, and we also have a large sort of lived experience component. So I usually share my story every month about what my experiences have been like and add specific examples to each of the symptoms as they're described, just kind of like give it some life. And then we usually try and have a program graduate come and share some of their story as well. So while this is about education and outreach, is also about empowering our people that have gone through our program that are excited to like break down stigma and share their stories. And we'll talk a little bit more about a little bit later more about like where we see that headed.
Those are the Edwinas, if anyone
Right.
that like to
Totally.
do those, and we appreciate them hugely.
And another thing that I really loved about this job is it's been really dynamic, because not only am I doing one-on-one work and group work, I'm also sort of giving feedback and collaborating on outreach materials. And that's been really interesting. So helping with sort of adding to the PowerPoint to give more lived experience perspective, helping with, we're redoing our website, giving feedback on that, like what language resonates with me, what do I think is too overwhelming aesthetically, you know, what do I think would catch for a younger audience, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's been a lot of collaboration.
And I think nicely we've, no, that's okay, keep going. I think nicely we've, go, okay, have emphasized building the peer relationships from the get-go. And I think as we're going through these slides, what we've tried to convey to you is not just the successes and where it's gone well, although clearly we're a little excited, but also the challenges as we described in that like mutuality of building trust. It's very complicated work, and difficult conversations are just plain difficult, for example. But what we've done is we've built in these areas to create a system change within our model in the same way that we encourage families and participants to have different experiences with the system broadly. So although we were originally thinking, let's go over the successes, let's talk about the challenges, my sense is we've talked a lot about the challenges. And I'm wondering if we could open it up for conversation with other people, or is there anything else that you
Well,
want to
I
make?
wanted to talk a little bit about how the peer support is.
The group?
Yeah, well, were you wanting to do some discussion first and then finish?
Because I think we have 10 minutes left.
Oh,
And we want to make sure do we have 10
Yes.
minutes left? Is that right? 11, yeah,
Got
thank
it.
you. So I just want to make
Yes.
sure we have time for questions.
I thought that was
so
until questions. I didn't realize that included question time. Yes.
so is there anything else burning that you want to make sure we talk about? I feel like we did the challenges. Some of them, not all of them. There's
yeah,
plenty
I'll
more.
just touch on.
We've made some mistakes. It happens, but I just like
love to talk. Yeah, so this is just briefly like I introduced myself within the first couple weeks. We exchange contact information, and then we go out in the community and do stuff. And I have an activity group that I run with another peer support specialist, and we have fit that into the program so it allows for good like travel time to work with other parts of the program.
And guess who always used to run her clinical sessions late into the peer activity group? Me. Guess why? Because I'm a therapist and I think I'm more important. I didn't even realize I was doing that. So it occurred to me, again, these like hidden biases that are built in. So I've been really, I run late for everything, frankly, but I've been really careful to not run late for that because that should be up at that higher level of priority.
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much the rest of our presentation. Let me see if I can.
So that gives us plenty of time
We
for
talked about
questions. Do you want to talk about
those
goals?
Yeah, goals. So we touched on this a little bit that, well, I had sort of mentioned that I would talk about it later, that we've been having graduates have this opportunity to speak at the workshop, and I think this is shared by a lot of the team members, but definitely spearheaded by Sarah Lynch, the program director, this sort of desire to create a speakers bureau, an advisory group to get as much input back into the program and as much spreading of knowledge and awareness out of the program that could be come from both the participants and family members. So that's something we're sort of looking forward to expanding on.
So in addition to the peer activity group, starting some peer support groups, you were thinking of informed by?
Oh yeah, the Hearing Voices group and the Alternative to Suicides, like trying to incorporate some of that. And yeah, creating a parallel position for family support.